I was gutted when I found out that Michael Olise was leaving Reading to join Crystal Palace. Not because he was joining Palace, but because he was leaving Reading. One of our standout performers last season and one of the very, very best players to come out of our academy. Our academy has a rich history of producing fantastic young players, but Olise was up there with the very best. I think it was a day we all sort of knew was going to come this summer. That the club is in a tricky financial position, so to get money in for Olise, I think was always expected. One of the more valuable players in the side, but yeah, gutted that he's gone because he is a fantastic young player, but also proud of what he's achieved at Reading and signing for a Premier League club now. And just very, very excited to see what he can do because he's still only 19 years old, and the sky, I firmly believe, is the limit for this young man. I can very much see him playing Champions League football in the next 5 years or so. I really do think he's got the potential to go to the very, very top. Crystal Palace is exactly the right sort of club that Olise needs at this stage of his career. It seems the logistical next step, really. There were rumours linking Olise to, the very, very best clubs in Europe. Clubs towards the top end of the Premier League table. And to be honest, would he be ready for that at this moment in time? Perhaps not. He might not have got opportunities. He might have been sort of left sitting on the bench, or perhaps gone on loan had he signed for a club towards the top end of the Premier League. But a club like Palace, a mid-table sort of bottom half Premier League club, I think is exactly the right step for him. He'll get opportunities. We've seen with Eze last season coming from QPR. Similar-ish players, sort of similar stages of their career. As a little bit older, but I think it's the right step that Olise needs, and particularly now with Patrick Vieira in charge, I'm sure that would have played a part. Olise picking Palace. Obviously, Olise himself is half French. He's represented France at youth level, so I'm sure that Vieira now being at Palace will have played a part in that. And Vieira's got a history of coaching young players, developing young players, and so he seems to be the right manager now for Michael Olise, because I think he's still a player that needs coaching. He's still a player that needs an arm around him, and I think he'll get that at a club like Palace that perhaps he wouldn't have got at a higher end Premier League club. If I was to sum up Michael Olise in one word, it would be creative. He gets on the ball and he makes things happen. He's a really exciting player to watch in that sense. He loves to get the ball, he loves to spray passes around the pitch. He's got fantastic passing ability, particularly sort of playing through balls into the strikers. It was a lovely goal last season. Lucas Shaw scored against Bristol City, where Olise played an outside of the foot through ball, and it was just sumptuous. 12 assists for him last season sort of highlights how creative he really is. Second in the Championship in that regard, only behind Emi Buendia with those 12 assists for Olise. So yeah, at his heart, he's a very, very creative player. Loves sort of close control, dribbling, getting at defenders. He's got fantastic skill on the ball. Sort of very, very mazy runs, and it's a joy at times to watch him sort of glide around the pitch, and he makes it look just so effortless. In that regard, he's probably sort of best suited, and where he played most of his football at Reading, in that number 10 role behind the striker, where he's sort of given that creative freedom to sort of pick passes either side to play them through to the striker. He has also played out wide, both on the left and on the right, where he can sort of cut inside or sort of whip crosses in, which is equally well suited to. But I think long term, particularly with sort of that creative trait of his and the passing and the close control, I think the number 10 role is pretty much where Olise sees himself. I am intrigued actually to sort of see where Palace deploy him, because he is a fairly similar player to Eze. Obviously, Eze is right-footed and Olise is left-footed, but in general they are fairly similar players. They are naturally number 10s, I suppose, but can play out wide. And obviously, you add in Zaha into the equation as well, and you sort of have three very, very exciting attacking players, and that's for sure. If Vieira can find a way to get all three of those players, Zaha, Eze and Olise, into the same team, it's an incredibly exciting attacking three behind Benteke. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think whether he finds a way to include all three of them, whether perhaps Eze and Olise sort of interchange, and obviously Elise's not played in the Premier League before, so maybe he will need a bit of time to adapt, and maybe Eze starts the season sort of in that number 10 role with Zaha on the left and maybe somebody else on the right. I'm not too sure, but there could be a way to fit him in. Don't get me wrong, as I say, Olise can play out wide, so perhaps Vieira might decide to go Zaha up on the left, Eze in number 10, and Olise cutting in on the right. That might work, but yeah, I'm as intrigued as anybody to sort of see where they play him, because he is quite versatile. His preferred position is that number 10 role, so whether Vieira gives him that freedom there and puts Eze out on the right or Zaha out on the right, I don't know, but it's probably a good problem for him to have, because as I say, there's three very, very exciting attacking players there who will scare Premier League defences, I'm sure. In my mind, there's no doubting that Olise is a Premier League quality player. He's got that talent, he's got that ability. As I say, I can see him playing Champions League football in 5 years' time. Whether he can make that step up instantly, it's going to be interesting to see. Ultimately, he is still only 19 years old, still a very young player, younger than Eze was last year when he made the move to the Premier League, and obviously Olise hasn't been tested against Premier League defences, but as I say, he's certainly got the quality, so long term for sure he will fit in the Premier League. I have no doubts about that. He's a bit of a confidence player, you might say. So if he can get off to a good start, get a goal or assist in his first couple of games, then he might then set the Premier League alight. But if he finds things tough to begin with, then he might need an arm around him, a bit of a confidence boost, because as I say, this will be the highest level he's played at. He's not been tested against Premier League defences. He's got the quality. There's no doubt about that. But whether it is, as we've seen with a few players, particularly young players, stepping up from the Championship, whether he needs a couple of months to bed himself in, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But as I say, long term, there's no doubting his ability to play in a Premier League whatsoever. I think if you were to ask Reading fans to pick a weakness in Michael Olise's game, they wouldn't necessarily pick anything to do with his ability on the ball. As I say, in that regard, the sky's the limit for him, because he's so talented. But perhaps one thing that people have picked up upon in the last couple of years since he's been in the first team, question marks over attitudes perhaps at times, when he's been substituted in games, his reactions not always been the best, not always the most mature, shall we say. I think he needs to stay grounded. I think there's perhaps allegations that he believes his own hype a little bit, but again, as I say, he's a young lad. He's 19 years old. None of us were perfect when we were 19, and probably we all dreamt big. We all had big wide eyes, and we perhaps weren't the most mature. So, as I say, I think that's something that's much more easy to fix than an ability problem, because in that department he's got virtually everything. But as he gets older, as he plays more first team football, as he gets coached more, hopefully that should improve. If he can stay grounded, if he can react better to being substituted, then ability wise, the sky is the limit. The £8 million fee is probably what's divided Reading fans more so than his departure, because we always say expected him to leave this summer. It's the price tag that has got some fans up in arms. Obviously it was part of his contract. It was a release clause. Realistically, look, he's worth far more than 8 million. When you look at again, I'll use the Eze example. When you look at he signed for around about 20 million. Olise is comparable to that, and it's probably worth around the same amount of money. Sort of, if you're talking ability and potential, 8 million is an absolute bargain for Palace. Obviously it was a release clause. He only had 1 year left on his deal at Reading, so obviously there was the risk that if Reading didn't sell, we ran the risk of letting him go for free next summer, which we certainly can't afford to do in our financial state. So. For us, at the moment, any money is good money. To get £8 million in will certainly help with us trying to fight FFP regulations. But yeah, for Palace, it's an absolute bargain, considering what you can do and what he will almost certainly go on to do. Hopefully maybe we might have a sell-on clause or something similar. Because to get £8 million for a player of Olise's talent, some Reading fans have called it criminal. So, that tells you all you need to know. That the reaction has been more around the price tag than the fact he's left. Because Palace have got an absolute bargain, an absolute steal for £8 million for a young player with enormous amounts of potential.